Welcome to Unite Now, where we bring unity to you, wherever you are.
All right, welcome everybody. Today we are going to be learning about the terrain tool. For anyone just joining us, we are taking the first few minutes here to set up the project. So if you've not set up the project yet, go ahead and download the terrain files. We've been posting them in the chat. This bit.ly link is in the chat, so go ahead and follow that link. Or you can type this directly into a browser window. This will allow you to download the Unity asset package, and then it'll just be in your downloads folder. So that is step one. Again, downloading the assets for today's session. Then we move on to step two, which is to create a new Unity project. We're going to be using Unity 2019.4. A lot of questions about this version. Why are we using this version? This is the LTS version. LTS means long-term support or long-time support. This version we know will continue to work for the foreseeable future, so we will continue to use this version for the Learn Lives, at least for the near future. So plan on using this version for all of these sessions. For today's session, we are just using the 3D template. So go ahead and create a new project in Unity 2019.4 using the 3D template. And once you have that project created and you have the bit.ly assets downloaded, step three is to tie it all together, right? Drag those asset packages, or asset package rather, into the Unity project window and go ahead and press import. So who is this voice? My name's Andy Jevsevar. I'm the Director of Technology at Kairos XR, where we build immersive training solutions. I'm also a Unity certified instructor, and I am joined today by a handful of awesome instructors that are going to be helping answer all of the QA questions and support the session as we move forward. This is the team here. Go ahead and say hello in the chat. There are quite a few of us making these sessions possible. We are going to continue into a quick session overview. We just did the introductions, and then we'll jump right into the challenges. So the majority of these sessions will be spent in Unity working through the project. In today's case, we're going to be creating custom terrains. And then at the end, we are going to have an additional 15 minutes beyond the hour to, just kind of hang out, answer questions, make sure that, you guys were able to get through all the challenges, help troubleshoot anything that you may have. So one thing I do want to call out on this slide is that we do have the watch, do, and explore over here on the right side. So you'll see these icons coming up in the top right corner. So I'll call them out as they come up, but I encourage you, when you see the stop sign, just to watch. It'll be a demo. They shouldn't take too long, but it'd be best if you watch me work through the demo. And then following each demo, there will be an opportunity for you to dive in with the green thumbs up and start working through Unity yourself. So this is the time you'll dive in, you'll work through the challenges. Again, we'll be standing by to help answer any questions that you may have. And this last icon here is an explore, which, just building off of the thumbs up is just time for you to kind of explore the tool, kind of go off script if you'd like. So again, I'll call these out as they come up, but keep an eye out for these. All right, so if this is your first time joining us, firstly, welcome. We're glad to have you. Using Zoom, we find that this is the ideal Zoom layout. So if you want to go ahead and set up your screen to look like this, we find that works best. If you have a question, please use the Q&A panel. The reason being is this just helps us keep track of all the questions, so we can make sure to answer, again, all of those questions. So use the Q&A panel. If you have a comment, letting us know where you're tuning in from or anything else, general messages, feel free to use the chat for those. Okay? And then if we launch some polls, we'll let you know, so you can keep an eye out for those. Worth noting that you can go to the Unity Learn site and go to that Live tab, and you can find the recordings of these sessions, right? So if you've missed a session in the past, or you'd like to review this session after the fact, they are recorded and posted there. So feel free to find the recording of Many Learn Lives there. It's a great place to continue to learn and work through projects. And as a reminder, technical questions, anything related to the topic today, go in the Q&A. And then just, general thoughts, comments, everything else, let's reserve that for the chat window. All right, so what are we doing today? We are going to be creating a terrain. This is an introduction to the terrain tool. So in order to kind of get through this, we're going to start with creating a custom terrain. We're going to look at how we can sculpt that terrain, right? How can we add mountains and valleys and add holes and bridges and terraces and kind of make that what we want it to be. And then once we have the shape of our terrain, we're going to focus on adding textures, right? Starting to make it look more realistic, more like a natural terrain or an environment. And then, any terrain needs those additional details to really top it off. So that's going to be the foliage, and we'll talk about some additional details in that last challenge there. So this is what you can anticipate for today's session. All right, so what is the terrain tool? It is an in-editor tool that allows us to create custom environments. Again, you can see a few videos here. There's some good content on Unity's YouTube channel, so I encourage you to check those out. But just to give you a high-level overview, the terrain tool literally allows us to build, custom outdoor environments. Again, we can sculpt, we can add textures, we can add foliage, as well as other details. Right? So when would you use the terrain tool? Well, you use the terrain tool to create your own custom environment, right? And why would you use the terrain tool as opposed to just bringing in, maybe an FBX from Blender or Maya? Well, the terrain tool allows you to actually customize your terrain in Unity. Right, so this is going to be a benefit to the terrain tool versus just bringing in an external asset, right? You can continue to modify it. This is helpful typically as you continue to work on your projects, right? If you want to add, a foundation for a building, or you want to lay a foundation for a bridge, or you need to add a little path for maybe your main character. These are things that you can really easily do in the terrain tool, and we're going to see how to accomplish those today. So again, why would you use the terrain tool? Well, it really comes back to, rapid prototyping. You can build something really quickly with the terrain tool. And when I say prototyping, I don't want to mean this in a way that it's not high fidelity, or you can't end up with something that is, ready to publish, because the terrain tool has evolved quite a bit, and we can actually, use some high quality textures, some really cool tree assets, foliage, and we'll talk about a few of these tips and tricks today to really get the most out of your terrain tool, and it's something that you can use in your final projects, and you'll see in a lot of the published Unity applications out there. A few other highlights here: it has a speed tree integration, so there's actually a speed tree integration into Unity, so you can create your own custom trees. The benefit here being they'll interact with the wind and physics as well. So you have the integration built into Unity, but you can also use the external speed tree tool and then import those models. The objects on the terrain, we'll talk about this again today. When you place objects, such as trees or rocks or whatever, these are all Unity objects, which means that we're going to get all the benefits: the colliders, the LEDs, all the lighting. Everything is just native to Unity, which means that it's going to plug in and work well with all of the existing systems. The terrain tool allows us to simulate quite a few effects, right? So we can create bridges and terraces. There's erosion. We can even import height maps. So if you have an existing data set that you're trying to replicate in Unity, go ahead and do that. Some of the new features, we're able to add holes. So this allows us to create caves and different topography. And then we can create foundations using the set height method as well. So that was a quick overview of what the terrain tool is and why we would use it. But now, how do we use it? So I'm going to jump into Unity here. Again, I'm going to call out the stop sign in the top right corner. I'm going to encourage you to watch my screen as I move through this first demo. It should be pretty quick, and then we'll turn it over to you and you can actually work through the challenge yourself. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and share my screen over to Unity here. I've gone ahead and imported those sample assets that we'll be using for today. And so let's talk about how you would set up a project to use the terrain tool and to create your own custom environment. So again, I'm here just in a default scene here. I've imported the terrain assets. Again, there's a couple things we'll talk about. But overall, I could just go in and create a terrain right away. What I want to call out in this first step is the terrain tools. That is a package that we can import. So if I go to Window, head to the Package Manager, what I can do is I can search for, or I can just scroll down and find the terrain tools. And then you can go ahead and import this package. I've already imported it, so I don't have to wait while that imports. The reason that you would import the terrain tools is it allows you to modify the default settings of terrains. It also allows us to bring in things such as height maps and further customize the terrain. So there are some things in here that are a bit advanced. I do want to call this out though, because as you continue to explore the terrain tool, it provides a few more options of customizability. So I'm going to call that out here. Again, find the terrain tools in the package manager. One of the other things that's really great about the terrain tools is they have this link, right? They have this download link for these asset samples from the asset store. These asset samples are already going to be in that package that you downloaded at the beginning and imported into your project. But if you are creating a brand new project or maybe integrating terrain into an existing project, I would recommend downloading this asset samples. This has a few standard textures. It has some brush types. We'll talk about these things. But this is actually a really useful package that I recommend you get whenever you'd like to work with terrain. So again, you want to import the terrain tools package and then download the asset samples. And as a reminder, these asset samples are already included in that asset package that you've downloaded. So calling this out for future projects that you may work on with the terrain tool. All right. So once you have that package imported, we can just go ahead and create our first terrain. So just going up to the Create window or right-clicking in the hierarchy, you can go down to 3D Object and create a terrain. You'll see it right here. Unity will think for a second, and then we have our terrain. Notice that the default size here is quite large. If I zoom out here, you can see it is quite large, but if we're thinking about this, we're creating terrain. It's going to be large. We want it to be pretty big. Again, with those Unity, the terrain toolbox that we just downloaded from the package manager, I just want to call that out so you can start to explore that. But once you have that imported into your project, you can go to terrain in the terrain toolbox, and it brings up this new window here where again you can kind of set the general parameters, right? You can see that right now it's starting out with a 500 by 500 size terrain. We could modify that here if we wanted a different starting default value for the terrain. You can see a few other options here. We can import height map, and there's a few things that you can further customize, right? So I'm going to leave this as an explore task. We're not going to spend too much time in this today. But do want to call this out that this allows further extensibility of the terrain tool. So again, I found that by going to Window, Terrain, and finding it right there. So right now I'm going to close this out. We have our terrain. We are going to get started sculpting this in the next demo, but want to make sure that everyone following along has the opportunity to download that package from the package manager and create their first terrain. And let's go ahead and take a moment now. This is going to be a green thumbs up, which means that it's your turn to go ahead and open the package manager, install the terrain tools. I add this notice here with a double asterisk because if you've downloaded the Bitly assets, you already have this in your project. But moving forward, any new project or any existing project you want to work on, you are going to want to bring these assets in. They have some very valuable textures and brush types and some kind of default tools that allow you to really take the terrain tool and use it to its full capability. Then we'll go ahead and create a 3D object, terrain, and get that into the scene. And then, as a bonus here, feel free to explore the terrain toolbox and modify the default terrain settings. Again, this is kind of a bonus challenge here. But let's just take a minute or two and go ahead and set this up in your project and create the first terrain. Let me know in the chat when you have this package imported and you have your terrain created in your project. One thing that we need to do with this package, because it is a preview package, we need to make sure that we have the advanced selection available. So I'll be sharing my screen here in Unity again. I'm going to go back to the package manager. So one thing you want to make sure that you have selected here in the package manager, all packages. That's step one. And then over here in the advanced column, you want to make sure that you have preview packages enabled. So the preview packages is what's going to allow us to see the terrain tools. Okay? And we can see that this is called out as a preview package here. Again, using the advanced dropdown, show preview packages, then you should be able to find the terrain tools. And you can also do a search for it if you're unable to find it. Awesome. I'm getting the green light from a lot of folks here in the chat. So glad to see that we got the terrain tools imported into your project. The first terrain is created. So let's go ahead and dive into the next demo. Again, if you have any questions, the Q&A is the place for you. So now let's talk about sculpting, right? So first we're going to modify again, the landscape here. So we're going to modify the terrain by sculpting it. Once we have it sculpted, we'll add those textures and then we'll add the foliage. So that means that right now we need to get sculpting. So let's go ahead and jump back into Unity here. And let's go ahead and dive into the sculpting. We have a terrain. And what we want to do now is we want to raise and lower and create something that looks like potentially a natural environment, right? Something that looks like a terrain. So with the terrain selected, I'm going to go ahead and select it here. I want to go and select this Paint Terrain tab. So there are a few tabs here. We'll be working through a few of them, but we're going to start with the Paint Terrain tab. Okay. And now when we have this selected, now we're going to have this drop down that allows us to choose our brush type. Right. So you can see there's quite a few options on what we can do. And I'll encourage you to explore these options and modify your terrain to your liking. But for starters, I think that raise and lower terrain is a great option. So I'm going to select that one. We are going to move down here. We can select a brush mask. So this is going to modify the tip of our brush, right? If we have something that's solid like this, it's going to be very uniform versus some of these kind of noisier brush masks. And you can kind of explore. There's quite a few, and some of these are coming in from that asset package that we downloaded from the package manager, right? So I'm just going to choose, and any of these is really fine to begin with here. And then magic starts to happen, right? So with this selected here, I can go ahead and move into my scene. And as I drag this around, I'm getting a little preview of what this is going to look like, right? And now if I click with my mouse, I can start to raise and modify terrain. Right? So I can paint terrains this way, but that's a start. We want to modify this stroke because this does not look very natural as is. So I'm going to come back over here to the inspector. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to modify a few things here. So we have the idea of brush strength, right? So that's going to be how powerful it is, right? So if I have a really low brush strength and I click once, it's going to look something like that. If I have a high brush strength and I click once, it's going to look something like that, right? So that's really just the strength, meaning how fast it's going to lift up the terrain in that case. Moving down to brush size, you can see that we can start to modify this as I bring this up. I'm going to get a larger brush size. I can modify it that way. I can modify rotation, and I can also modify spacing, which is going to be how often it repeats itself as you drag it around. Right? So I want to call out a few hotkeys that make this much quicker. So if you hold down S on your keyboard and drag your mouse back and forth, you can see that that is a hotkey for modifying the brush size. So again, S on the keyboard. Then we have D on the keyboard. The D key, delta, allows you to do a rotation. And then A is going to be your brush strength. Right? So if you look at this stroke, this is A, alpha, S, Sam, D, delta. Right? So those are some hotkeys that allow you to quickly modify your terrain. So we have kind of the basics right away here. What I want to call out now is, some of the kind of best practices, or maybe some tips will help you, in creating something that starts to look like a real terrain. So what I'm going to do right away is I'm just going to Control Z, undo kind of all that demo work right there. I'm just going to get back to my flat terrain. And I want to walk through a few steps that I like to think about when I'm working on a terrain, and hopefully you find these helpful. So let's go ahead and dive in with a few of these tips. So the first tip is starting with kind of a larger brush and starting with the larger areas of your terrain, right? So let's kind of think about this for a second. Maybe I want to create kind of some raised mountains and hills on this side. And then I'm going to have kind of a set of like a plain over here, right? Just pretty flat. And that's kind of the vibe that I'm going for. So when I first come in, what I want to do is I want to kind of get the big kind of foundational layers done. So I'm just going to come through here and kind of create mountains along this side here. Something that I like to do is modify the size as I'm going, right? Modify the rotation. And this helps, create something that doesn't look so maybe uniform, right? This starts to look a little bit more natural. And I can modify the strength as well, right? And then, kind of create something. The other thing I like to do is change brush masks quite often, right? So if you use the same brush mask over and over, everything's going to start to look the same, right? So what we can do is we can actually come in here and change the brush type quite often, and that will help create something that looks a little bit more organic. Right? Cool. So got something like that. I mentioned that I would like to create kind of a plane right here. So we'll leave that as is for now. But that is kind of one of the first tips that I like to start with. The next thing that I like to do once I kind of have that original or kind of base layer down is I like to go to my main camera. Okay. So if I'm a main camera in the scene, and you can notice that it is still positioned at the default position over here. And what I like to do with that main camera is position it where I think that my character is going to live, right? If I'm creating a first-person character, where are they going to spend their time in the terrain? Or if you're creating more of a static scene or something that is an architectural visualization, and this is just a surrounding scene, placing the camera where it's actually going to be, or in a spot that you desire it to be for the final scene, will help you to start to preview this, right? Because right now if I go into the game view, this isn't what we want, right? Our camera's at the default position. Rather, I'd have my main camera position somewhere. Okay, and I have an idea. I think I'm gonna have my main camera position somewhere like here, right next to the kind of the plane here and looking up into the mountains. So what I can do now is I can position where I want to be. I can bring my main camera over to this position. A quick way to do this is just select the main camera, position your scene view where you want it to be, And then you can do this Control-Shift-F, which is align with view. And what that does is it says, main camera, move to where my scene view is right now. So now if we look at the game view, it matches our scene view, which is really quite awesome. It's a quick shortcut there. Okay. So why do we do that? Again, that'll allow us to kind of preview what our scene is going to look like in the end, and it helps us kind of focus, right? We can focus on this area now, and we can fill in the rest of the areas later on. So now I'm going to move back to the terrain. Another pro tip here, that as you're working with this, one thing that can be frustrating is if you're painting along and then you accidentally click off the terrain, you're going to lose the inspector here because you've deselected the terrain. So a trick to avoid that is if you select the terrain, you can actually go up here and click the lock button. Okay. So if you click that lock button, now even if I click off the terrain, should stay on the train at this point. Right. So that is another little hot tip there. Keep that lock button on the train. And then we're talking about the raise and lower terrain. You can get a lot done just modifying the strength and the different brush masks. I do want to call out a few different brush types here, and then I'll turn it over to you guys so that you can start actually creating your own terrains. One of the features that is pretty cool that you can use is this idea of terracing, right? So if I select this terrace and I come down to my terrace count, and we'll see what this looks like here in a second. I'm going to bring this down, say maybe 50. And what this allows us to do, I'm just going to select the circle brush here. What this allows us to do, so if I come in here and drag across here, right, you can create these terraces automatically. So depending on, what you're trying to create, this could be something that is pretty valuable, right? You can create a nice terraced hillside, if you're trying to simulate some agriculture or maybe some different types of environments, you can use that. I'm going to undo that right now. Wanted to call that one out. So that's the terrace tool. Another tool that is oftentimes very useful is the erosion tool. So if we look at wind, for example, what I can do with the wind tool is I can simulate wind erosion. What does this mean? This means you can create sand dunes, essentially. Right, so as I start to drag this around, this arrow right here on the tool tells us which direction the wind is blowing. So let's look over here, for example, and as I hold that there, it creates essentially, that wind erosion, which is going to look something like sand dunes, right? So that is a pretty cool effect as well. I encourage you to check out the other types of erosion as well. And then I want to call out two more, and then I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can start creating your terrain. The next one is the bridge. Right. So the bridge allows us to create essentially a foundation for a road, right? So let's say that I want to create a bridge from this side of the valley over to this side, right? So what I can do here is I can Control-click, select my first point, move over to here, select my second point, and it creates this level bridge, right? So again, very helpful for creating roads as well as different foundations for different buildings and structures and items in your experience. I'm going to go ahead and undo that one. And the last one that I want to call out here, and I'll turn it over to you guys, is the set height, right? So set height does exactly what it says. It sets the height of the terrain. And this is helpful, again, for creating foundations, right? So let's take an area like this right here. Let's say we wanted to add, a structure, some cabins, or a little settlement. We can come in here, we can set the world height, and then it will level this all down to that desired height. Again, very helpful when you're creating foundations. All right, so we are, again, modifying the terrain height here. So we're sculpting our terrains. I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can start to modify your terrains, and we will be here to help answer any questions. Go ahead and with your terrain selected, hit the paintbrush tab and start sculpting away. So use the raise and lower brush, select different brush masks, and then explore the other brush types, right? This is an opportunity to explore and really see what's possible with the terrain sculpting tools. Okay, and if you get through all of that, check out this little bonus challenge here, which is create a neighboring terrain. And so I'll show this when we jump back into Unity, but you can actually link terrains together, right? So that first square, and you want to add another square, you can continue to link these together, and you can actually have one cascade into the other. So one will adopt the terrain from the previous one, and they'll kind of match up and weld nicely. A few questions regarding the set height tool that we showed there at the end. So if you have your terrain component, and then you go to the paintbrush tab, use that drop down, right? So you have the options to, sculpt, raise and lower terrain. Then there's an option called set height. So you should find that option called set height. With that selected, there are an additional set of controls that come up underneath the stroke drop down, which allows you to determine the height that you set it, right? So it's default, I think, set to 5, but you could set it to any height that you'd like. Again, very useful for creating foundations, roads, different things that require a level surface. Right, good question coming in about the terrain tool versus the terrain toolbox and the tools that are imported from the package manager. By default, the terrain tool exists in all Unity projects, right? So even if you don't import that package manager or that package from the package manager, you will have the terrain tool, right? So what we're doing here with painting and sculpting, that exists in all Unity projects. What the package provides in addition to that is the ability to modify your default terrain settings, right? So by default, this is set to 500 by 500. If we wanted to modify that, then we would need to use that terrain toolbox. The other major benefit to bringing in that package is it has that direct link to the asset store to download those additional assets that are a great starting place, right? They come with additional brushes, which we're actually using already in our project, right? That brush mask area, there's a lot of different brushes there that come in from that asset package. And there's also textures, which we will see in the next demo. So terrain tool is in the project already. Terrain toolbox that you download from the package manager provides additional functionality, right? Great question coming in. So the shortcut that I used to move the main camera to my scene view is Control plus Shift plus F. But just to solidify that, if you go to the game object dropdown, the actual command is called Align with View. Right? So if you select the game object and then use game object drop down at the top and select Align with View, that will position whatever object you have selected to your scene view. Really handy way to quickly move objects to match your scene view. Let's go ahead and move on here so we can add some textures to our terrain and start to make it look like an actual environment. So again, we have a quick demo here. I'm going to call that out with the red stop sign here in the top right. What we want to do now is we want to create some terrain textures. I'm going to show you how to paint these on here. So in order to do so, I'm going to jump back into the editor. So here we are in the editor. And as you can see, this is where we left off, right? We created this nice mountainous region over here. We leveled a little area here, and we left kind of these plains over in the corner here. The bonus challenge for that previous sculpting challenge was to add a neighboring terrain. So I want to show that real quickly, and then we'll jump into adding some textures. So if I click this Create Neighbor Terrains button here, so this is the first tab in the terrain tool. What this does is, as you can see, it creates this grid, which then allows us to quickly add neighboring terrains. So I'm going to go ahead and create one right here just to show you. If I click, it creates a new terrain here. And as you can see, you can start to literally build out your terrains just by clicking in these different regions and building this up. So if you're looking for, a massive world in your experience, you can quickly kind of build this up. One of the cool things about this, I just want to call this out here, is that if I zoom in here to this area where I've sculpted on that first terrain, you can see that everything is welded nicely across to this neighboring terrain, right? There's not like a gap here. So what this allows you to do is, once you have multiple terrains like this, you can actually sculpt from this one right onto this one and continue to sculpt a large environment. So I'll just leave those, but I'm going to still focus on my first terrain, at least for now. So what we want to do now is, I'm going to go back to the paintbrush. We want to make this terrain look good, right? Right now it just looks like a generated terrain. It looks very computer generated. It doesn't have real textures. It doesn't look like an actual environment. So how do we make this look like an actual environment? Well, step one is we want to actually change the texture on this from this default computer generated texture to something that looks more like an actual terrain. So we can still use the paint tool, similar to what we were doing with the sculpting, but we can just come down to paint texture. Okay? So I'm going to select this. What paint texture allows me to do is literally paint textures onto the environment. So with this selected, I want to scroll down and I want to select this layers drop down. Okay, and I'm going to collapse this stroke right here for a moment, just to save some space. I'll collapse this brush mask as well, just so we can focus on this layers tab, this layers drop down. Okay, so when you first want to paint a texture, you're not going to have any layers in here. So what we want to do is we want to add some layers. So go ahead and click this Add Layer button. It will bring up this Select Terrain Layer menu. And you can see we have a few default options. Again, these come in with that asset package that you downloaded or that you get through the package manager. So another benefit of bringing that in is you have these default layers. I'm going to start with rock. Okay, I'm going to double click this and add it in. When this is added, it immediately applies to the existing terrain all over, right? Which is fine, but a pro tip here is to start with that base layer. Start with rock, right? If you start with snow, for example, it'll look funny if you have snow on bottom and then you're adding stuff on top. So I'm going to start with rock. What I like to do here is I actually go in and add all of the layers right off the bat. So I'm going to add dirt. I'm going to add moss. I'm going to add sand, scree, and snow. Okay. Again, all these layers come from that asset package that we downloaded at the beginning through the package manager. So really helpful asset right off the bat. So right away, we see that the whole terrain has changed to rock. Well, that's fine for a foundation, but we do want to make this look a bit better. So let's go ahead and start painting in our different layers. And what you can do is you can literally just select the different textures that you'd like to paint on. So again, I've got this big flat area here. I'm thinking I will make that sandy. So let's start there, and I can just paint that sand on, right? Just like that. Okay. So now we have this kind of sand plains down here. And then, we just kind of want to work up. So let's think about the textures that we have, right? And where they would actually live in a real environment, right? So sand generally is going to land on, you know, the lower areas, right? The basins, the valleys, the plains. Something like snow is going to live in the higher areas. So let's add some snow onto the tops of the mountains here. So I can, let's make sure I have the snow selected here. And I can just paint that on. One kind of tip here, see how that's just looking like blanketed in snow? And, you know, if this was a really cold environment, it maybe look like that. But I'm going to undo that. And what I would like to do here instead is I'd like to use my brush mask and get one of these kind of noisier brush masks. And this will help create a little bit more, you know, realistic looking snow, right? Because it's not fully blanketed, but, you know, just kind of layered on top there. So similar to how when we painted the terrain, you know, this is something where you'd want to modify the brush size often, you know, kind of continue to rotate this, change your brush masks, so nothing looks too uniform, right? So, you know, just come across the top of your mountains here and add some snow. Let's move down here. We'll want to keep the rock on these kind of vertical faces, but maybe something down here would be more in the dirt category. So I can select dirt and fill this in here. So that's all looking good. And little patches, right? If you're trying to emulate the real world, it's important to remember that things are, you know, pretty organic. So there's not really hard lines. You want to avoid the hard lines, right? Something like that wouldn't really exist so much in the real world. So you want to, you know, just patch that over and make it look a little bit more random. You know, we can add some moss in here. Maybe we'll add some water down here in a bonus challenge. So add some moss in the bottom. You know, continue to come in and just paint this how you would like it. Again, modify your brush stroke often, your brush mask often, and it will make things look less uniform. So that looks good. You know, you can continue to modify this, zoom in, you know, get those areas. Again, look at what your game view looks like. How does this look? Looks all right. But, you know, maybe we want to modify this a little bit. So we'll come down here and hit it with a little bit of that. That looks a little bit better. So that's really what there is to it. So with that, you can really start to add some textures to your terrain and start to make it look like an actual real world terrain. Especially from, you know, a high level view. Like if we look at it from up here, that starts to look like a, you know, pretty decent looking environment. We'll work on the close details because as we zoom in, maybe it doesn't look as great, but we'll work on adding some foliage and things to make that look better as we zoom in there. So let's go ahead and jump back into the deck here. Saw a question come in while I was chatting. We have these layers here, right? These are the ones that we brought in at the beginning with that package manager. And again, you downloaded the assets today. But you can create your own, and you can find these elsewhere too. So if I just select this rock, for example, if we just look at this in the project window and I unlock my inspector, you can see that this is just a terrain layer, right? So it takes in a diffuse map, a normal map, and a mask. So you can create your own or import them from different sources. You can just create them using the right-click create and then coming down to terrain layer here. All right, so if you wanted to add your own or import other ones, you can do that. But again, these are the standard ones that come in with the terrain tools that we downloaded. All right, let's go ahead and share back to the slide deck here. Got the green thumbs up. That means that it's your turn to add some texture to your terrain. So go ahead and select the in the paintbrush tab. You're gonna configure the texture brush and start painting the textures onto your terrain. And again, the few pro tips here, if you continue to vary the brush masks, it's going to make your scene look more organic. And also starting with the foundation layers and then working up, right? You don't want to add snow everywhere and then add rock on top. It makes more sense to add rock first and then add the other layers on top. So let's just take a couple minutes here. You should be able to get some terrain painted all around, and then we'll continue on to the next challenge. Yes, we have a question here about the terrain package. So just to clarify, you downloaded the assets for this project at the beginning of today's session. That has some default packages and everything in there that we're using today. But if you are creating a terrain in your own project, again, you're going to want to get a very similar set of assets. And the way you get those assets is by using the package manager and going down to the terrain tools, importing that package, and then importing the assets that are linked in that package. And that'll have the the terrain layers that we're using here. It'll have some different brush types, some of those things that are pretty useful for creating terrains. All right, so we have a question coming in here regarding the tiling, right? The tiling of these textures. So what can happen is, since we're painting these everywhere, if we have a large section that is just one type, you can start to notice the repeating pattern, right? It looks very tiled. So let's look at the game view, for example. Right here, it looks decent. That looks like dirt, and this looks like sand over here. But up here, you can kind of see that this all looks very much the same, right? This texture here looks kind of repeated. We can see the tiling on this. So how can we adjust that? So how can we adjust the tiling of the textures here? A quick tip is what you can do is you can actually, let's come down to, let's go back to the scene view here, and let's look at an area like this, right? So you can see that this is the same texture that is just tiled across this terrain, and it looks okay, but we can make this look better. What you could do is you can select your rock terrain layer here, and you can modify the tiling right in here, right? So right now it's 50 by 50. We can make this 10 by 10, and we can see the effect there. That makes it look even more tiled, to be honest. But what is a really good tip here is if you take this rock layer and then you just duplicate it, right? So if I just do a Command D or Control D on this, I'll get a rock that's the same. It's the same maps and everything, but then I can modify the size of this one. So maybe we want to do this one that is 75 by 75. And if I go back to my terrain, I can import that second rock layer. And now I can overlay those two rock layers, and all of a sudden that is something that starts to look a little bit more organic. So again, that is a nice tip to vary the layers by creating multiple versions of the same layer, just changing the tiling settings. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to create the terrain here, add some textures. Let's move on to the next challenge here. And since I'm already sharing my screen, we'll just dive right into it. But now we want to add some foliage, right? We've, up to this point, added the terrain. We have gone ahead and modified the height and everything. Now what we want to do is we want to add some trees as well as some grass to start to make this look like a real environment. So with the terrain tool selected, what you can do is go over to the Paint Trees tab. Okay. And similar to how we were painting height and textures, we're going to be able to paint trees. What we need to do is click the Edit Trees button here. This will allow us to add a tree. Okay, and then you'll have this opportunity for a tree prefab. Okay, so select this, and what I'm going to use is this this conifer tree. Okay, so conifer _ desktop. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. What that does is it adds it here, and then I can just click add, and then I'll see this tree right here in my terrain. This tree is a speed tree, so if you want to create your own, you can use the speed tree tool, or create additional trees here in Unity. I'll show you how to do that in a second. But this is one that is in the standard assets that is a speed tree. So this means it's going to be affected by wind and other physics effects in Unity. With this selected, I can again modify my brush size and settings. I generally like to bring the tree density down. I don't want loads of trees right away. You can increase the range of your random height. And then I can come in and I can start to paint these trees. And this is where our terrain is going to really start to evolve here. So just go in. Again, keep your game view in mind, right? So if I'm over here, I want to kind of paint trees all up and down the sides here. Okay, I'll just paint something like that. That looks pretty good. Okay, and maybe I want to remove these trees. You can hold Shift and erase. So I'll just erase those. Just in my game view, got like that tiny tree there. Let's go ahead and remove that. Okay, so now we've got the trees. So you can continue to add trees that way. One thing I want to call out here is also the ability to add grass. So let's go ahead and add some grass. The way we add grass here is by going to the Details tab. Okay. So in the Details tab, very similar to the Tree tab, go down to Edit Details. You can have an opportunity to add a grass texture. It will bring up this Add Grass Texture window. We can go ahead and select here. I can search for grass, and we have a few default options we can use. I'm going to use this first one, the grass frond 01. I can modify some of the settings here. I'm just going to leave it as is for now. Go ahead and add it. And then I can select the brush. And with this selected here, I can go into my scene view and I can kind of paint some grass in. Okay, and I'm just going to go easy on the grass down here. Go back to the game view, and you can see that that grass is getting added. So go ahead and continue to paint that in until we have something that we like. Again, with grass and trees, think about where these items would live in the real world, right? It wouldn't make sense to have grass on this completely vertical wall here that's all rock. But down in these flat areas, there would probably be quite a bit of grass. So keep those ideas in mind as you are kind of painting your terrain. Okay, so I've got some grass, I've got some trees. And so now I want to turn it over to you so that you can go ahead and create this foliage here. We'll have this opportunity to create the foliage in your terrain. But before we do so, I do want to recognize that we are at the end of the hour here. So we'll come back to this challenge here in just a second, but I do want to close it out for anyone that has to leave right away. We are going to stick around for the next 15 minutes, and you have an opportunity to work through this challenge, ask some additional questions, but do want to be aware that some people may have to leave right now. So we have this challenge. We do have a bonus challenge, right? So this is a bonus challenge. So if you watch this recording back or you're looking to take the train to the next level, come back and check out this bonus challenge. It doesn't take that long, but add some water as well as a wind zone to your scene to make the trees move and add some of that realism. But we've accomplished a lot already. Again, we are going to hang out now for the next 15 minutes or so to help answer any questions and allow some more time to work on this last challenge. But if you have to leave, feel free to join our Connect group. That's a great place to continue the discussion. And post your complete project here, the terrain submission. So this is a place where you can kind of build out this project and then post your work. You'll be able to share this with the network of Learn Live users and other people working on these projects. So really encourage you to take advantage of that. But if you have to go, thank you for joining. Again, there's the bit.ly link for the Learn Live Connect group. And if you'd like to connect, I would appreciate it. So find my LinkedIn there at bit.ly/AndyXR, and we can connect there. I'll leave this up for just another few seconds. We'll jump back to that last challenge and continue to answer questions. So feel free to stick around if you have the time. We'll be around here for another 10 minutes or 12 minutes or so. Yeah, so we have a question here about the tree density. So the tree density, it can by default be pretty dense. So one of the ways to really, bring that down is to bring your tree density value all the way down and then decrease the brush size as well. And then rather than holding the mouse as you paint, do some taps. Like if you just tap, click, 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 you can end up with a more sparse, tree kind of layout in your scene. We have a question here about a flowing river. I would love to see that feature added to the terrain tool. Right now, the terrain is really about making the terrain, sculpting it, adding the trees and grass. Flowing water is not part of it. The solution there, the bonus challenge here talks about how to make water that's at least like a lake or a pond. If you want flowing river, I would encourage you to check out the asset store. There's quite a few options there for water simulation. And then the big consideration that you're going to keep in mind as you make that flowing river is performance and your target platform. All right, so if you're targeting a computer and you have a graphics card, it's not going to be a huge deal. But if you're going for a mobile device, you want to keep that in mind as you develop that river simulation. So keep that kind of end platform and performance in mind as you do that. We have a question here about making the grass draw further away. Right? So how do you adjust the draw distance? So in the terrain tool, if you go over to settings, so in the terrain component, we have the tree, the paint trees, the paint details, and the next tab over is the terrain settings. And there's an option there to adjust the detail distance. We have a question here about creating trees and foliage. I assume you mean speed trees and creating your own. Few things to keep in mind here. One, the Unity documentation does have a little tutorial on how to make a speed tree. So something you can explore and start to create your own. The other consideration is if you go to the speed tree website, you can actually download existing trees that are speed tree assets. I'm sure you can also find something on the asset store. But again, something that is a speed tree asset. And let me get the exact file type of that speed tree asset so that you know. Hang tight. .spm files, right? Those are speed tree files. And that's going to allow it to interact with the wind and physics really nicely in Unity. So again, to answer the question directly, you have the Unity documentation walks you through how to create a speed tree in Unity. There's a direct integration. You can find existing speed tree assets on the speed tree website and download those and import them into Unity. Check the asset store for speed tree assets. And then, between those three options, you should be able to get some pretty groovy looking trees. So we have a couple questions here about adding tunnels, holes, caves. So the terrain, one of the terrain brushes that you have, if you go to the Paint Terrain tab and then use the Paint Holes brush, you can actually like paint holes into the terrain. And so at first this may seem a little strange, but what you can actually do is you can paint a hole and then you can create another mesh that could simulate a cave, right, or a tunnel. So this allows you to kind of go through a terrain, which is something that was not always possible with the terrain tool, so it is a welcome addition. So what is the purpose of paint holes? To create tunnels, caves, items like that. And then how do you create a tunnel or a cave? Use the paint holes brush. We have a question here about the grass. Looks like it got answered. But to modify the distance that you see the grass, again, you're going to go into the terrain settings tab, which is the rightmost tab on the terrain component, and you can increase the detail distance. So we have a great question here about undoing something without using the undo buttons. Like if you raised terrain, or if you added a hole and you wanted to like cover it up, what you can do, most of the terrain tools here, let me just shift to my Unity editor here in the last couple minutes so we can help answer all these remaining questions. Let's say that in my scene view here, I added like a hole that I didn't want anymore. I don't want this hole here anymore. Notice that most of these terrain tools have instructions right here. So you can left click to paint a hole, or you can hold control and left click to erase it. So if I hold control, I should be able to cover that back up. Okay? So to answer your question, if you hold control, you can cover it back up. How did I add a tree? So I went to the Paint Trees tab, and then you go to this Edit Tree options and Add Tree. And then it'll allow you to choose a prefab. And then I go into here, and again, these are a few of the standard speed tree assets that are available. And once you have one, click Add, and it will come up here, and then you can select it and then paint it in. We have a quick question about adding water. So this is a bonus challenge. We're right at time here. Let's see if I can get this done in 1 minute. It's pretty straightforward, but it does add quite a nice effect. So let's get this done here. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to place my main camera right where I'm looking here. So Control-Shift-F moves my main camera to match my scene view. Right, so if I zoom out there, I can see that that's where my main camera is, and look at the game view. So looking out, what I want to do now is I want to add water. So to add water, this is something from the standard assets. So if we look down here, standard assets, environment, water, prefabs. Okay, there's this prefab called Water Pro Daytime. So if you find this, and you can just search for it, again, this comes from the standard assets. If I drag this in, okay, I can double click on this to focus on it. You can see it's placed right here by default. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom way out. I'm going to use my transform tool, and I'm going to move this over. I'm going to bring it up so it's 2 meters above the ground, and then I'm going to expand the scale like to 1,000, pretty big. Maybe even more, needs to be more, 1,500. Right, and so now I've added this Water Pro Daytime, I've scaled it up, and if I look at my game view, I can see that water kind of out here. So it simulates like a nice big lake or possibly an ocean. So pretty cool. And a really simple way to take your terrains to the next level, right, is by adding that water. This water does not work with the scriptable render pipelines, to my knowledge. There will likely be a solution for that. I know there's a few other ones you can create with, like shader graph, for example. Some more learning there to create that water. But I think there's some solutions on the asset store as well. But for standard 3D, this is a great little solution. Water does not have physics with it. You'd have to add that in yourself. So to add this water, again, you'll just find the asset here. Again, it comes with the standard assets, which is a package that you can download from the Unity Asset Store. You can just search for it in this project, Water Pro Daytime. And then once you have it selected here, the prefab, you just drag it into the scene and then position it. All right, so folks, I think we're a little over our session time here, but did want to make sure that we got the answers to the questions here. So appreciate you all sticking around. Hopefully this session was valuable and you're able to learn something you didn't know about making terrains, and hopefully you can integrate this into your own projects. Again, we hope to see you in a future session. Thanks everyone for joining and participating, asking the questions, and we will see you soon.